Hello everyone, it's Zach from Feel Free to Argue again. You know, I realize that I've been being kind of a bummer, kind of a downer, talking about all the bad stuff that's going on in Iraq. I didn't mean to imply that there were no winners in the Iraq War. Of course there were winners. If there weren't winners, we wouldn't be over there. You may not feel too good about who the winners are, but I think I'm going to spend the next couple of videos trying to explore just who's making out thanks to the Iraq War. Well, I don't think any discussion of the Iraq War can really go anywhere if you don't start with an understanding of the oil. Now, I know a lot of people think that it doesn't get down to the oil, that we have other motivations. We'll talk about those in other videos, but for the time being, let's just try to get our heads around how the oil economy works and what our various kind of oil-based ideas in Iraq are. So most of my information comes from Greg Palast's book, Armed Madhouse, which I heartily recommend that everybody read if they're interested in understanding this subject and a few other subjects that are pertinent. What it all basically boils down to is that there was a fight over what we should do with the oil in Iraq. And there were two differing opinions about how we should utilize this ability to control Iraq and Iraqi oil. The neoconservatives, on one hand, wanted to have industry, outside industries, basically buy up Iraqi oil and then use it to pump and try to bring O.P.E.C down to its knees. And the neocons, of course, think of this in a military strategic sort of way. They view O.P.E.C as being one of the last forces on Earth with an ability to really kind of impinge on our military hegemony. So what do? We do what we can to try to get under O.P.E.C's skin and throw a wrench into their ability to control the world oil market. You talk to people on the oil side of things, they're not very impressed with this argument. Simply put, Saudi Arabia just is too powerful. Saudi Arabia has the largest oil reserves in the world, and in addition, they have enormous cash reserves. So at any point, they're more than happy to open the spigots, drop the price way down, and ride it out. And basically this is the sort of kind of economic terrorism that Saudi Arabia engages in order to maintain its control over O.P.E.C. It's far and away the most powerful member, and at any point, if it feels threatened, like by the time that Venezuela started, pumping some oil outside of its O.P.E.C quota, Saudi Arabia flooded the market and drove the price down, nearly ruined Venezuela. It was even willing to do the same thing to Russia when Russia started pumping outside of its quota. Once again, that was one of the times that Saudi Arabia flooded the market with oil and dropped the price down. And coincidentally, one of the other times that it used its power to manipulate the price was immediately prior to the 2004 elections here in this country, in order to give a little punch up to their friend Bandar Bush in the White House. But if we look at what the oil companies want, the oil companies don't want to own Iraq's oil fields. They actually want a state-controlled monopoly because that will enhance Iraq's relation with O.P.E.C, which means that if we have like a puppet state in Iraq that we can kind of use to control Iraq, then Iraq can continue to be part of O.P.E.C, and this is actually good for the U.S. oil industry. Let me read now a bit from Greg Palast's book. It has been a very good war for big oil, courtesy of O.P.E.C price hikes. The five oil giants saw profits rise from $34 billion in 2002 to $81 billion in 2004, year two of Iraq's transition to democracy. But this tsunami of black ink was nothing compared to the wave of $120 billion in profits to come in 2006. $15.6 billion for Conoco, $17.1 billion for Chevron, and the mother of all earnings, Exxon's $39.5 billion. For these record-busting earnings, the industry could thank General Tommy Franks and the troops in Baghdad, the insurgents and their oil supply cutting explosives, but most of all, they had to thank OPEC and the Saudis for keeping the lid on supply, even as the planet screamed in pain for crude. And the industry was not going to let neocon think tank fantasists kill the OPEC goose that laid the golden earnings. Of course not. So looked at from this perspective, you can see why, there's been all this resistance. I mean, I thought when we went in there, if it was about the oil, that, our oil companies would end up owning all of the Iraqi oil in a matter of months, at most a year. But as this has kind of dragged on, I've been wondering, why haven't they just gone ahead and taken the boondoggle? And now I know why. Because as individuals, they can't be members of OPEC. But if they can control Iraq, and Iraq remains a member of OPEC, then we're basically kind of facilitating Saudi Arabia's continued control of OPEC. Because, well, this is sort of like Microsoft buying out Apple, in that, Saudi Arabia has the world's largest reserves. Well, what's advantageous for them? The most advantageous thing for them is to keep their foot on the throat of the people who have the second largest reserves, which would be Iraq. So the whole situation is very beneficial for Saudi Arabia, very beneficial for the U.S. oil companies. And of course this makes sense, because who represents Saudi Arabia? Who is their legal counsel? James Baker III, very good friend of George Bush. And as we see how this all pans out, let me read you a little bit more from Palast. This is the extent of how profitable it has been for them. U.S. oil majors get very excited when they see an OPEC member enhance its relationship with the cartel, and for good reason. The latest enhancement doubled OPEC's benchmark price for crude, which also doubled the price Exxon and its comrades may charge for crude pumped from Texas and Alaska. And not just from Saudi Arabia, because, these prices are enforced everywhere. So if they get the oil cheaper, that's even more money that they make. OPEC's 2006 prices produced a windfall of approximately $48 billion a year from sales of oil produced in the U.S. Altogether, the windfall for oil companies taken from U.S. customers totaled $305 billion over pre-war prices in the first 3 years since mission accomplished.